Welcome into the Toyota Lounge, driven by your Front Range Toyota stores. Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR. I'm Justin. Michael. Andre Simone is here, and man, it is a good day to be a CSU Ram. It's always a good day to be a CSU Ram, but it's especially nice waking up, finding out Nique Clifford is back, baby. We're going to be talking about it.
Huge.
What the lineup could look like this upcoming season, how it kind of impacts, the Rams in the grand scheme of things, what their preseason projections are like, all that fun stuff. We're also going to talk at the end about John Weber reportedly being named full-time athletic director at CSU. This was always the expected outcome, but I do think it's a very exciting time for the athletic department as a whole. First things first, man, how's it going?
Doing great. Big day. So I'm excited to get into all the stuff. I know you had a late night. Yawning a little off stage here. This Nique Clifford stuff really came down to the deadline of all deadlines.
Yeah,
as late as possible.
He had until like 9:59 p.m. Mountain Time or whatever, technically, to file the paperwork, midnight Eastern Time, essentially. I went to bed. Actually, I didn't. I fell asleep on my couch with my laptop on my lap, WordPress open, and holding my phone, waiting for some responses back from sources. That's the glamorous journalism life for all you out there. If you think it's all fun and games, sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing. Yeah, you can have some humbling moments for sure. I'm gonna go live tomorrow morning. By the way, before I forget, I just want to tease it a little bit. I caught up with Bo Brock of PHNX. We talked about Trey McBride, how he kind of factors into the equation long-term with the Cardinals after his breakout campaign. It was a really fun interview, so make sure you tune into that. I'll probably talk a little bit more about CSU track and some of the people going to nationals and all of that. CSU football added a walk-on wide receiver out of the Ivy League. I'll talk about him a little bit more tomorrow as well. But today, it's all about Nique. I mean, this was a situation where, honestly, it felt like over time it changed a lot in terms of like what the most likely outcome was going to be. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said it's a foregone conclusion. He's gone. He certainly went into the NBA combine, this whole pre-draft process, with the mindset of, I am a pro. I'm going to show them. Worked out for the Hawks, worked out for the Nuggets. Had kind of a so-so showing at the combine. Probably didn't do enough to quite elevate his stock, but yeah. I will say, I do think he's shown enough both at the collegiate level and just kind of with this athletic profile that if you would have put a knife to my back even yesterday, where it was starting to sound a little bit more optimistic regarding the possibility of him returning, I still think I probably would have leaned that he goes pro, because I think in a weaker class, I really do think someone out there probably would have taken some type of chance on him. Where are you at on this? Was this surprising to you?
Gun to my head, I would have said he declares. It kind of felt like that's what the tide was for a second, that he did enough, had enough interest as a 3-and-D guy, that he had this great season in Fort Collins. It was time to kind of capitalize and get in. But it's a weird draft, because while it's a weaker draft, it's a really deep draft with guys like Nique in that tier.
It's a lot of project picks.
Yeah, and I mean,
with high upside, but still projects.
Late first, he's competing against other veteran wings like Kevin McCullough and Baylor Shireman, and other veteran guards like Trey Alexander and Jameer Watkins out of FSU. I mean,
and I think some of these guys have shot the ball a little bit more consistently.
They no doubt have.
And for me, I think that's really what it comes down to for Nique and what he kind of needs to do this year. We'll talk about that and whether you think he could be potentially a first-round pick in 2025, the areas you'd kind of like to see him.
But honestly, I think he probably was feeling pretty good about going in the top 40, 45 picks. I think, from reading the tea leaves, and you can tell me I'm full of shit, that's totally fine. Let's see what you think. I'm guessing he held out to the very end and was thinking he might get a promise from a team.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you want to see how things play out. You want to see like I'm sure there was a select list of guys that he and his, representatives are kind of eyeing, like, are they staying in the draft?
Right.
If they go back to school, maybe that shifts things for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're waiting for conversations with teams who are doing the same thing, like giving their guarantees based on how things play out. And, ultimately, Nique, he wanted to go pro. And that's why, repeatedly over the last couple of weeks, whenever anybody asked me, I was just honest and said that my gut is that he will move on. I think he's an NBA caliber defender. I think he has the athleticism that translates at the next level. I think there's a role for him on a contending team, even as is. I do think there are some things that can be refined, and we'll get into all that. But I just want to commend him for making what's, a decision that's really difficult. And that's like, trying to essentially assess the risk reward of like what I do here. And I think for a lot of guys at that age, especially when you already have a degree and you're not necessarily thrilled about the possibility of having to go back to school, a lot of guys I think could just be stubborn to a detriment and be like, I didn't get the guarantees that I thought I was going to get from an NBA team, but I am an NBA player. And then all of a sudden, you declare, and a whole variety of things could happen. I mean, maybe a team does take a chance on him late in the first round. Maybe he goes in the second round. But, I mean, there is a possibility where, like, even if he gets drafted, you're just on a G League deal making $40K riding buses in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, if you go fully undrafted, right? And there would have been an opportunity to shine in Summer League and maybe ease that a little bit, routes. And I mean, it really was going to come down to fit for Nique. I think the tough thing to calculate for Nique was, could I sneak in to the late first? Because I think teams in the early second were far less appealing to Nique. Like, you don't want to end up in a place like Charlotte. You don't want to end up...
That's a good point.
But teams like the Nuggets, Bucks, Knicks, holy cow, he would have fit perfectly. Where you can be the fifth starter or the energy 3-and-D guy off the bench. Perfect. Would have been fantastic. So that's where you got to figure that out. And I think he's gambling on himself, right? I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, is he saw the kind of success he was able to have at CSU in his first year. And he's saying, let's run it back. Age seems to be much less of a factor in pro scouting for the NBA than it used to be. He has an intriguing opportunity, because while next year's draft might be more loaded, it might be less deep, and there might be more of an opportunity at the end of the first with those contenders to find a more logical fit.
I'm with you. I mean, I think he refines a couple of things, and he has a solid chance to play his way into the first round. We got some people in the Toyota chat here. Mitchell wants to know super early thoughts on the starting five. We're going to get into that here in a couple minutes, so make sure you stay locked in. Rick saying tough decision to make. I think lots of Ram fans are excited to have him back, but should respect the fact that this was probably bittersweet for Nique. And yeah, that's really what I'm saying is, based on everything that I have heard over the process, like, Nique was dead set on going pro, and it didn't really work out the way that he hoped. But the silver lining is that he gets to come back to a program which he has thrived in. I mean, you look at his numbers, he had jumped in 3-point shooting by 10%, jumped his field goal percentage overall by like 15+%, career high in scoring on his most efficient output. Like
I mean, in one season to have gone from the player he was exiting Boulder to actually being a legitimate NBA prospect tells you everything.
It's so close.
The jump was monumental in one season.
So much potential. I mean, with his explosiveness and like his verticality and the fact that he can score on you at all three levels. I mean, in November and December, he had one of the best true shooting percentages in the entire country. Like he was killing teams from deep. He's able to, kind of hurt you with that little pull-up mid-range game. And obviously, like, once he puts his head down and he's going to the hoop, I think he has so much upside. I think he just needs to come back and just refine a couple of things, really. Like, it's not like he's that far off.
No, for sure. And honestly, the couple of things he needs to refine as a pro, they're more of a bonus than, like, essentials. The essentials are basically there for Nique Clifford. It's the bonus stuff the extra fancy, it's just tying a bow on top, it's when they wrap your package for you at the store and they roll the ribbon for you, it's that nice little touch, goes from flat to it's all curled up. That's all that we're doing in this final season for Nique. Now, that bonus stuff at CSU matters a ton, though. Without Isaiah Stevens, that stuff's going to be crucial. How much more of a secondary initiator for the offense can you be, right?
Yeah.
That handling, I think, is really promising, and you see it when he goes coast to coast, when he attacks closeouts. But can you now show, instead of you have a nice tight handle going downhill, is there a little more finesse to it? Yeah, some playmaking. Vision, being more of a connective tissue as a passer, as someone who initiates the offense and knows, oh, I'm going to attack here, then pass it here because that's going to lead to an open guy.
And I think he showed some of that as the season went on.
I do too.
Like in the Mountain West tournament, in the NCAA tournament in particular. I think, in his double-doubles in the wins over Nevada and then Virginia in the NCAA tournament, arguably two of the most important games of the entire season. He had like a combined 31 points, 20 rebounds, 11 assists, and 4 blocks.
Right.
Like the dude can do a little bit of everything. So
he can. And then the shooting needs to improve. You said
just be a little bit more
score.
consistently.
Mid-range, I think, is the area you're going to have to improve in most. I like some of the catch, dribble, move, shoot stuff he's got in his arsenal.
Yeah. As
just a pure catch and shoot, if you can get those percentages up 2-3 more points, that's going to be monumental. And then take on the challenge of being the alpha wing defender in the Mountain West Conference.
Yeah, I think he should be I'll have to go through the rosters again, obviously. But I would put him at least as one of the top front runners for Mountain West, Defensive Player of the Year. I think he should be a preseason all-conference pick. So,
sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just do a couple more things. The catch and shoot, you could see as the season went on and he started to knock him down a little less consistently. I felt like there were times where he hesitated, and I felt like I even saw some of that in the combine where there's moments where you got to let that rip, man.
Totally.
And if he can do that, if he can knock him down consistently, if he can just build off of what he's already shown as a defender, I think he'd be a late teens, early 20s pick next year. We'll have to see, obviously, how
you really need to do it consistently at that age to be that highly regarded. But I think, squeezing into that 21 to 30 range is ideal for him. From a less technical standpoint, we just listed off a lot of the scouting kind of bullet points. There were times last year where on this set, we were challenging Nique and others outside of Isaiah Stevens to step up. Sometimes he did it, sometimes less so. Without Isaiah, that's going to really have to be your bread and butter next year. That's why everyone's so excited about Nique coming back. Now it's time to show it and really be kind of that
he's got to be the guy. You're
leader.
the face of the program now.
Exactly.
Exactly. He was one of the guys last year, but Zay very clearly is the face of the program.
No doubt.
Now that's on you. The X to keep him in town, but with that comes raised expectations and more of kind of a responsibility to lead for the team. I think it's also a testament to the staff and their ability to retain top talent. In an era of instability and we're seeing guys go left and right. JT Toppin leaves New Mexico. We saw San Diego State's both top 2 guys move on and go to Virginia and Kentucky. So the fact that you've had now 3 consecutive years of your top guys being in the mix to either go pro or come back, and the decisions have always been, well, I'm either going to go pro or I'm going to come back to CSU. That's huge.
Monumental. It's kind of been a quiet theme of this entire offseason is the Rams athletic department being able to retain top talent that comparable schools in this conference are not finding ways to retain. Plain and simple, man.
Future's bright in Fort Collins. I'm going to get to this super chat from my guy Nick here in just a second, but with a future so bright, you got to pick yourself up some Shady Rays, guys.
Always.
Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades that are built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company. Yeah. Their product, though, it's world-class. It's rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. They've got durable frames, highly clear optics. Look, guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. When I take these glasses off, I am blind as a bat. Some sunglasses, I put them on, it's overwhelming. Now it seems like it's nighttime. I can't see anything. I'm blind and it's dark. Shady Rays gets rid of all of the glare, but I still feel like, I can see where I'm going. If you lose or break them, no sweat. They're going to replace them with lost and broken replacements. Shady Rays has your back, and you can always return them within 30 days for free. There's no risk when you shop. They always have your back. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays giving out the best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and make sure that you use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. After you pick up some Shady Rays, if you're strutting around feeling cool, you're probably going to be in a pretty chill mindset, which is the mindset I am encouraging you all to embrace this summer. And after you do that, pick yourself up an ice cold Coors Light.
Oh, yeah.
I might have to have a silver bullet or two tonight in celebration of what's happening here in CSU. Raise a glass to the future of CSU men's basketball. Raise a glass to Nique Clifford coming back to Fort Collins and having us all amped for this season. Could the Rams go to a third NCAA tournament in 4 years? We're going to talk about that here in just a second.
Right.
But always remember, when the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. When you embrace a chill mindset, it's a good time to choose chill and crack open a Coors Light. Crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill with Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by using Instacart, or just go to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Love Coors Light.
Nothing like a porch beer this time of year and thinking about all the good things that could come to your favorite team.
It's much preferable to the porch beer where you are sitting in self-pity and wallow and wondering where it all went wrong. I've been in that spot too.
Yeah, this summer's kind of been like that with Avs and Nuggets.
That's what I was going to say. Most recently, sitting there,
I know,
looking at pictures of Nikola Jokic, listening to Sarah McLachlan. I will remember you.
Sad, man. Too soon, honestly.
How does this... I got to get to the super chat real quick. Shout out to my guy, Nick Reese, with the super chat in the Toyota chat.
Thanks, Nick.
NCAA tournament would be great, but I want that Mountain West Conference title. Let's get it, Nick. I think that's a great way for us to segue. Shout out to everybody in the Toyota chat, by the way, supporting us. So much love to the CSU community. If you'd give us a thumbs up, I'd appreciate it. If you're watching on Twitter, come over to YouTube. It's a superior product. You're going to love it, and you can get involved in the Toyota chat.
Yeah, jump on in. Have some fun.
How does this, though, and I think this is a kind of a natural segue off of that awesome super chat from our boy Nick, how does this change your expectations for CSU going into the year? Because I think they at least got to be in the conversation with the Boise States, the UNLVs. I mean, San Diego State, based on reputation, they haven't had a great offseason, but
it's massive.
Are they a contender to you?
It's massive. Yeah, this changes that. I think there's way more uncertainty and a lot more unknowns going into next season without Nique. With Nique returning, you feel really good. I mean, look, we've had the Toyota chat mention Nique and Torrey Horton coming back. Coach coming back is massive too, man.
Oh, just and I mean, you keep your head coach, you keep your lead assistant, and you keep your NBA eligible.
Yeah.
Top
your
player.
Star returning player.
Yeah, like the one guy you could have brought back.
I mean, that's a dream off season in a lot of ways, and then you feel good about some of the additions and some of the guys you're retaining from last year, and all of a sudden with Nique, this feels like a really intriguing team, which also has some sneaky good depth.
It's funny, and it's why I always preach patience. For one, this program as a whole operates much quieter when it comes to recruiting. Like they're not floating stuff through national people being like, so-and-so is going to be here this weekend. They truly like to have it be kind of intimate so that they can get a good read of, like, what does this guy bring to the table? Like, what is our connection like? Is it all just for clout? That's not what they're interested in. They want guys that are truly going to come in. I think they did an awesome job of rebuilding this roster on the fly, especially after, there were a couple guys we went after and kind of struck out on. Booth obviously ends up in the Big Ten. Cardenas coming over from San Jose State. We were in on him. He ends up at Boise State, kind of get outbid. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
But for them to be able to go out and get a guy like Jalen Crocker-Johnson, who, we had Kevin Sweeney of Sports Illustrated. He said if CSU doesn't land him when they do, within 2-3 days, he's signing with a high major, because to land a guy with that type of size and that type of versatility, it's really tough these days, because you got to deal with these high majors who can afford to drop $1.5 million on a guy like JT Toppin. It's just
and the years of eligibility left
with
for
3 years to play.
Crocker-Johnson, and how bouncy he is at that size.
Very quietly, I don't want to say I like this roster on paper better than the team last year, because I just, with Zay coming back,
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, he's the greatest player in program history, so
That'd be crazy.
But I do think there's some sneaky versatility, particularly within the front court now, that they didn't really have last year. Like last year, I think they were more guard heavy, and I do think you're still going to be obviously very dependent on these guards, and you're in a, often a 4-out, 5-out type system. Like guard play is going to be huge. But the toughest part about this system is that in order to play it, like, you have to be skilled as a 4 or 5. You have to be able to stretch the floor. You have to be able to pass the ball. And I feel like they went out and they found guys that can do that, like a Patrick Cartier, but they have more of the body type of like a Joel Scott. I like the versatility. I like the size.
I think you have more size this year.
Yeah, I mean, you bring in a true 7-footer and Joppa, who's a project. Like it's going to take some time. He's got to refine a lot of things. But like, what's nice is you can work with him behind the scenes, have him kind of come into his own while playing a smaller lineup. You don't have a true 7-footer out there, but if you had like a Crocker-Johnson and a Bemba out there at the same time, along with, Nique and Lake, like that's pretty good physicality. That's pretty good size. It's a good mix of athleticism for a G5 team or mid-major, however you want to phrase it or whatever.
And I thought that was an area they had to address, was size and a little more depth in the front court, maybe a little more diversity. Because you're right. I mean, this offense does require a little more IQ, passing acumen, and feel from your bigs. Ideally, a bit more skill. I mean, that's where, Patrick and Joel were really huge last year, and being able to stretch the floor, especially once Joel got going later in the year. That was so fun. Love me a Joel Scott 3. But yeah, now you still have that in Bemba and Jalen Crocker-Johnson. Crocker-Johnson probably a bit more skill and ability off the bounce, right? At least projecting long term. And then having the size in Joppa, and even Kyle Jorgensen is pretty massive. And Bemba was like your biggest, most physical, best defensive option as far as the front court guys went last year.
I mean, he needs to take a leap this year, or otherwise, he's going to get passed in the rotation. But that's the good thing. That's the thing about what they did this offseason. You're going into a position where you're excited about what the possibilities can be for guys like Rashawn Bemba, for Kyan Evans, but you are not solely dependent on those guys being superstars or taking a massive leap. Like, you go out and you get a point guard in Bowen Bourne, who probably,
it's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Mountain West championship or bust in your opinion? I mean, I go back and forth, because to me, like, at the end of the day, people remember NCAA tournament runs so much more than who won the regular season conference. I do think winning the regular season inherently is more impressive than winning the tournament. But again, I think winning the tournament, especially when you get the auto bid, it's during the time where everybody's locked into college basketball. Like, I almost feel like that makes a bigger splash. But there is something to be said about what it represents. And like, you've been so close. Like, that's the winning the Mountain West and making like a second weekend appearance in the NCAA tournament. Like, those are kind of the next steps for us, I feel like, in our trajectory as a program.
Oh, I'd agree completely. I mean, that's why Nico's coming back, right? And everything's ramping up, and the investment and dedication that this athletic department has made over the years would kind of warrant a big win like that. Going into this season, though, do I feel like it's Mountain West championship or bust, whether it's the tourney, the regular season? No. I think that's unfair. I felt like that way more last year.
Well, you had so much excitement. Like when you're flirting with the top 10 at some point, it's hard. It's, I think it's easy to be like, well, yeah, why shouldn't we win the league? And obviously it proved to be as deep as it looked in the non-conference, if not deeper. I mean, they had some tough moments that cost them, but I do think with Nique back, it is fair to say that you should expect to push for another at-large bid. I think a third NCAA tournament appearance should be the hope. Maybe not the expectation, but at least the hope.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I mean, it's you do have so many new pieces. Like
you have a ton of new pieces. With your star player coming back, as far as guys who could come back, with the additions you've made and with the trust you have in the staff and the track record they've shown over the years, yeah, that would be the hope.
Let me run this potential starting five by you and see what you think. I think it's going to be Bowen Bourne at the point guard, at least early on. I think you need the scoring. I think you need his veteran presence. Mm-hmm. I think you play Jalen Lake at the 2 for defensive reasons, and you hope that he can shoot the ball the way he's capable of. He's got such a pretty jump shot. It's just, can you knock him down consistently?
Jump a little bit.
Yes.
Because Bowen Bourne, I don't expect to be Nique or Zay by any means.
No, and he's not.
But Lake needs to be on the court with Bowen Bourne because he's undersized.
That's where this whole thing gets interesting, is you can't be in a position likely where you're playing Bowen Bourne and Cayenne at the same time, at least very frequently, because you're going to be insanely small and kind of really susceptible on the defensive side. But I mean, with the way that Bowen stretches the floor with his experience as a shooter, and he's a guy that attacks the hoop too, I think he would just be my front runner at this point to start.
Oh, 100%.
As like the point guard.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think he's going to be like John Stockton or Isaiah Stevens in the way that he facilitates, but I think he can create for others. I think he opens things up. But again, then you have Jalen Lake at the 2, Nique at the 3.
Sure.
And then it gets really interesting, because I think like potentially, because Ethan Morton is such a good defender, like you could play him at the 5 or 4. He's 6'7".
Yeah.
Hope that he can kind of stretch the floor a little bit, hit some corner threes, put him on wings, small 4s.
Right.
I think Bemba is obviously in that mix as well.
Yeah.
Both at the 4 and the 5. And then Crocker Johnson. Like I think Crocker Johnson would probably be the other guy.
Right.
I'll say Bemba and Crocker Johnson are the starting 4 and 5. You bring Morton off the bench for a defensive presence. You bring in Cayenne, and then you can
Joppa.
Yeah, Joppa obviously sees some of these other guys.
Yeah.
It will be interesting though to see like kind of how they do refine this rotation, because seemingly like every spot except Nique's is theoretically up for grabs.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the depth stands out, and I think the diversity of lineups you can bring to the table this year versus last year stands out to me.
Agreed.
Like you didn't have a ton of 2-point guard options.
Well,
this year, hypothetically, you do.
At least, like you loved what Josiah brought to the table on the defensive side, but just him not being able to buy a bucket for months on end, like that killed them.
No, and you didn't have a true 7-footer last year. This year you do. You didn't have the kind of bounciness and defensive alternatives in your bigs that you have this season.
I think they took a really big step in the right direction defensively this past year. I think with what they've done in the portal this year, they put themselves in position to kind of build off that and kind of continue that trajectory of like, yes, not only are we this really efficient offensive program, like you're going to score under Medved. That's never going to be an issue. But they're tougher now, and they're more just consistent defensively. And I mean, it's a testament to the staff. Shout out to Tim Shelton and Cooley and these guys. I think they did a great job. But I think they're recruiting under that now of like, we've shown what we can do, and they've kind of figured out like what works for them, and not having to sacrifice on the offensive side. But I mean, ultimately, if you don't defend, you're not going to go anywhere.
Well, and I think you really like the athleticism, length, and defensive potential with your 2 through 4 of Jalen Lake, Nique Clifford, and Jalen Crocker-Johnson. And then, having a Bowen Bourne who can stretch the court at the 1 and having Bemba who fits that IQ but also some toughness, rebounding that you want out of your 5. That's a very intriguing starting 5. And then you kind of see Evans, Morton, Japa, and the others who can kind of fill in and add to that rotation.
And for a team that lost 4 of 5 starters, I like the veteran experience that they were able to. I mean, you're bringing in guys that Morton's a 4-year player at Purdue. Sean Williams has been in college for 4 years.
Bourne, same thing.
Yeah,
right?
Bowen's
4
a
years.
4-year guy at UNI. And then the guys that aren't that, I mean, Jalen Lake, he's going to be in his 4th year at CSU. He's obviously very experienced. Bemba got a lot of run. Evans got a lot of run. Crocker-Johnson got a lot of run for being sophomores. Like, there's not a lot of guys that you're hoping, are going to kind of have to get their feet underneath them. Like, a lot of them should kind of be in that next stage of the process, of, like, kind of like you're saying, making a leap.
100%.
Take a deep breath, and then we are going to give some final thoughts on this, move on to John Weber. I'm curious, like, if it's not Mountain West championship or bust, we said NCAA tournament, but is it 20 plus wins? Like, is it too early? Do we have to see the schedule before we can have this conversation realistically?
I think it's more like top 4 in the Mountain West or bust.
Okay.
Which
you should be an NCAA
They weren't
tournament
last year, right?
No, they weren't.
So
you tied for 6th,
Yeah.
finished 7th on tiebreaker.
So improving on that with the changes that have occurred to the roster would feel like a big win to me.
Assuming that comes with the tournament appearance. I just mean, like, if you finish 3rd in the Mountain West but don't make the tournament, I don't know if that actually feels like better season.
Totally. I mean, you ultimately ended up higher in the conference because the conference was weaker.
Yeah.
Is what we're saying.
So I think you do. I think it's got to be the host. With Nique coming back, I think if Nique wasn't coming back, it's a much more like, you don't have a single returning starter, even though these guys are intriguing, and you've seen guys like Williams and Bowen Bourne being able to play at a high level. Sean Williams, by the way, didn't mention him. I think he'll compete for a lot of minutes at the 2 and 3. I think with the amount of experience that you have, I think you got to expect to compete for the tournament and make it. I'm not saying like make the Sweet 16, go be San Diego State, but
I understand.
I think especially now that you have locked down Nico Medved, he's making 1 point. I mean, that's football money. The expectation has gone from like, oh, this is kind of a cute little program on the rise under Nico Medved to it should now be like, I mean, you got to be up there with like San Diego State every year.
Yeah, you know how at-large bids are. They can be a little
very wonky.
I'll tell you this. Maybe this is more of my or bust. Actually contending for the conference crown going into like the final 5 regular season games. Actually being a Mountain West contender.
I'd like that. That'd be fun.
Because 2 months into the season, yeah, they were, but honestly, they weren't. When it was all said and done, they weren't a year ago.
You had a chance to play your way back into it, but the reality is when you lose your first 2 out on starting with losses in Logan and Boise, really put them behind the ball. And like they had to go essentially above and beyond like they did in the non-conference slate to then offset the slower start. And they unfortunately weren't able to. Obviously, you compounded it, had New Mexico and UNLV and Wyoming.
They weren't the best team in the conference.
No, they weren't.
There was no point once conference play started and we did your Mountain West power rankings where they were a serious contender for the number 1 spot. Next year, I think
they got back to 2 at one point, but
yeah. But were they ever a real consideration for number 1?
Not after January.
Yeah.
So
I think that should be a goal.
Anthony Barse, Ant-Man, says in the Toyota chat, I personally think Kashawn Williams starts over Jalen Lake. He'll be a 14 to 15 points per game scorer. Yeah, I think the battle between those two is one of the most intriguing. I think Nique coming back, I think without him, those two are both likely starting.
Right.
Lake is such a high-level defender that I think he's definitely going to be in the mix. I also think he has the possibility to kind of make a leap offensively, but I'm with you, man. Like if Keshawn Williams can be a guy that is scoring like he was a couple years ago at UNI, then yeah, he's probably in the starting lineup. And if that's the case, I mean, you have a proven guy in Lake who's been really reliable for you in that 6-man role. So that would not be the worst thing ever either. We do have some big news. I actually got confirmation via email that it is official. John Weber, the new athletic director at Colorado State. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. We also, and this was brought up in the Toyota chat a while back, Utah State defensive tackle. Man, I'm going to butcher this name. We'll just give it a shot. Pukese Vakauta. I got the island name coming over from Utah State. Big that the Rams were able to add some more depth in the interior. I'll be diving into him this afternoon. We'll talk about him tomorrow before that interview with Bo Brock of PHNX Cardinals. Before we get out of here, I just kind of want to put a bow on all this, and that's that, like, the direction of CSU athletics as a whole feels pretty exciting right now. Like you have some expectations for football. It's not quite on the same level as basketball, just based on recent success, but you're hoping to get back to the postseason. You're hoping to, win a rivalry game in front of fans for the first time since 2016.
It's the first time in a minute. It's the first time since how many coaching tenures do we need to go back to where we're past the building phase and we actually should expect some on-field competency week in, week out? We never got to that point with Adazio.
It's like probably the beginning of Bobo era where you're still banking off of what you did under McElwain. The hope is he's the, flashy SEC guy that's going to come in and build off of that.
So basically, since DNVR's existed as a company, it's the first time we've gotten past that building, and we should reasonably expect.
I would say so.
So that's exciting. And then, the hoops program.
It's on the rise, and I think that makes a lot of sense with John Weber getting the full-time gig, is that you have been able to see this really connected, I guess, vision between Weber and Amy Parsons, the president, going back to the basketball season. And then obviously once Joe was relieved of his duties, I'm not going to get up here and like try and dance on Joe Parker's grave or anything like that. I think there were things that he did well as an AD. I think there were things he didn't do well. The thing that I was most critical of him, though, was that to me, he did not generate enough excitement within the CSU Rams community. And I think that's a big part of being the face of an athletic department, is generating that hope, that like excitement for what you're doing behind the scenes and what you're building towards. And to me, it feels like since Weber was named interim AD and obviously now officially named the full-time AD, it just feels like there's some juice like within the program. Like the people are engaged. You see it online. He's active online. He's interacting with fans. So is Parsons. We're seeing him at events. We're seeing that relationship be repaired, I think, which was an issue. I think the last half decade was just that outside of the really tippy top level donors who Parker did a good job of associating with and like kind of keeping content, the greater relationship between the CSU athletic department and the fan base was really disconnected. And honestly, like there was some animosity there.
Sure.
Going both ways.
Yeah.
And I think you can't have that, especially like a time right now where you need to really have some big things happen so that you can stay relevant within this, ever-changing landscape of college athletics.
Well, and how quickly you're feeling that buzz and re-energization, if that's a word, in the athletic department, I think goes to tell you how hungry the fan base is, how willing to just latch on and support athletics at CSU this fan base is. They just needed a little something.
Well, they were just tired of the apathy. And, like, that's not to say that...
I think that's more public facing than... Right? Like...
I would...
action speaks louder than words. I think the athletic department's done a fantastic job.
They've committed to athletic. They're
1,000%.
Yes. I would argue, though, that, like, from a community relations standpoint, the interviews that were done, Parker would regularly go on the Ram Nation podcast and would just kind of be like, like, CSU fans, like, you want more, but it's probably not going to happen, and you should just accept that reality. Like, you can't, that's not the way to operate. Even if that was the truth, you can't actually say that as the leader of the department. Like, you have to create hope. Hope is such a big part of sports. Like, to me, that's honestly what makes the whole thing work. Like, there's very clear realities and challenges for CSU that make it harder to compete with the big, like, we know all of this, but you just want to know that, like, not only do I believe in what we're doing, we're going to go down swinging. And even if some of it is for show, like, I'm with you. I do think behind the scenes, like, institutionally, CSU was investing in athletics, improving the relationship between, like, Ram Nation, CSU fans, and the athletic department as a whole, and not just, like, the tippy top donors, but really, like, on the broadest sense. It needed to happen. And, like, to me, I think that's big for players wanting to stick around. I think it's big for coaches wanting to stick around. Like, you want to be at a place where it feels like the future is brighter than the past, And I don't know. To me, it seemed like at times, like, Joe was almost a little too honest to like, well, these are the realities and there's not much we can do. And that's probably true, but you can't say that.
I think defensiveness also seeps in when you're talking like that, right? And you're the
Without
leader. A lot of people are investing not just their hopes in you, but their hard-earned money. And as the leader, you need to do a better job of putting your ego and your defensiveness to the side and be the leader by establishing standards and expectations, right? And that's where the apathy you're talking about comes in and is unacceptable.
It got to a point where it felt like we had accepted that this is the status quo. Like, we missed the window, and that should never be the case.
The resources that have dumped in were never for this is the status quo.
No.
For what
you don't build that stadium with the hope of
Right.
I mean, we haven't even come close to what we're hoping it could be.
1,000%.
And now you're hoping that you build off the momentum. Ant-Man in the Toyota chat wants to know, do you think there will be a jump in NIL support in the community with Weber being announced as the permanent AD? That's a good question. I mean, I think
I've been damn impressed by what CSU's been able to pull off all offseason as far as in terms of NIL, man.
They're doing Green and Gold Guard's doing an awesome job.
Super impressed, really. I mean,
it's uncommon in this era, and I hope that Ram fans
and so drama free, man.
Yeah,
there just aren't many G5 schools who are retaining these kinds of big names, and they're doing it without a peep. Without a peep,
you're not having the situation where it's like the guy's agents like, oh, I don't know if they don't raise enough money.
Yes,
we got the bigger schools. People are invested. They see it. I will say, though, just in terms of like this question specifically, like, I think everybody knew that Weber was going to be the guy. Like, I think I said when they named him interim AD that they would name him the full-time AD likely before summer. So I think this was kind of expected. Anybody that's in that conversation that's given a lot of money probably already knew, but maybe this kind of just reaffirms the excitement. They're like, hell yeah, man. Like, I'm in on Parsons. I'm in on Weber. I'm in on this, exciting future. Hopefully that is going to translate to Medved and Norvell, like, having success long-term. It's a fun time though, man. It's a hell of a lot more fun than being, and I'm not saying this to be a jerk or even because they're our rival, but I mean, you look at like what CSU this offseason hangs on to Medved. They keep their top draft prospect. Wyoming's head coach left to be an assistant, and it's not even the first time this spring that's happened in their athletic department. They've got about $200K total for all of their NIL. Like, you can't compete. And right now, CSU is doing the things that they need to to compete and be relevant. And there's no guarantees. It doesn't mean it's all guaranteed to work out, but you're giving yourself an opportunity. And to me, as a Ram fan, like that's all you can ask for. As a basketball program, you want to be in the mix every year. You want to be competing in the mix for a conference championship. Like Dre said, over the last 2 weeks, genuinely be in the mix to win the league. You want to be competing for at-large bids, winning 20-plus games. We're not all Duke. We're not expecting to win the national championship every year, but you want to have hope, and it feels like the hope is back.
For sure. And honestly, like, it's a good comparison to Wyoming to really remind you what's on the other side. I think, with all due respect, CSU should have ambition that is much higher than Wyoming, right?
And it's probably going to be the reality. Like, there's probably a time in the not too distant future where that means we're no longer going to be in the same leagues. Hopefully that doesn't come at the expense of the border war. Hopefully both teams are mature enough to continue the rivalry in non-conference. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like, if you're a CSU, you need to be like this rebuilt Pac-12 that could come together with Oregon State and Washington State. You need to be up there with San Diego State and UNLV, like driving that conversation. If somehow, something opens up in the Big 12 or whatever, like you've just got to be in that conversation of like the most attractive schools that are still there for the taking.
100%. I mean, everything you just said when you compare the coaching losses. What happened to Graham Ike, last offseason? He didn't come back like Torrey Horton or Nique Clifford or BFN. Am I correct?
Yeah, he ended up at Gonzaga.
Yeah. Lesser NBA prospect than Nique Clifford.
Oh, by far.
Bye-bye.
I mean, mostly health reasons, but yeah.
Sure.
And just game, honestly. Like, Nique's way more versatile.
Yeah.
We're about to get out of here. One more question from Rick in the Toyota chat. Doing more with less takes innovation and creativity. Weber seems to be more willing to push the envelope and be more relevant in modern college sports. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Charlie says, another D-line commit today from Utah State. Is that the final piece, or should we expect more? I will answer that for you tomorrow, man. I got to reach out. That broke while we were live, so I'll have to hit up my sources, see what the scholarship count is like.
Back to Anthony's question on the commitment to NIL and how Weber changes that. We have said all offseason that really this should be a bit of a turning point offseason. And if you show people on-field promise, you show that these couple years of chipping away and working hard and making those investments and holding on tough, even though the success on field wasn't coming, I think you'll see it'll just open up the world for CSU in conference realignment opportunities, in NIL investment, and just you name it. Have another season, especially on the football side, that's like last year. It's going to be hard to get that same
strike while the investment.
Iron's hot. Yeah. This is a massive, massive season we are going into. I just don't think there's any way around it.
Can't put it any better than that. Shout out to everybody for locking in with us this morning. Much love to everybody in Ram Nation. You guys are awesome. I'm always proud to be. Much love, y'all. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.